Welcome to the deep dive. We are diving into a topic today that it really cuts against the grain of almost every financial commercial you see.
It really does.
The standard advice, the kind that promotes high risk, chasing massive returns, betting the farm, that advice has to change depending on where you are in your life.
It's the silent truth of finance, isn't it? The strategy that works beautifully for someone with, say, 40 years of earning potential can be financially catastrophic when your time horizon is shorter.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core lesson from our sources is a really profound one. When you have less time to recover from mistakes, the priority just shifts fundamentally.
Right.
You have to stop trying to be brilliant and start trying to avoid being stupid. It almost sounds like a joke, but this one shift in mindset is where sustainable wealth is really built.
That framing is so essential because this deep dive is focused entirely on the brutal arithmetic of time. It's not about judging capability or opportunity. It's about acknowledging the cold reality that the calculation of risk changes completely when your working years are constrained.
When you're young, risk is cheap.
Exactly. But later on, it's astronomically expensive.
So let's start there. Let's look at the basic math that people tend to ignore, usually at their own peril. We need to talk about the brutal arithmetic of loss.
Volatility, when you have a shorter runway, becomes your primary financial enemy.
So tell us about the math, because this is where the emotional side of things becomes a physical reality. If I lose, say, 25% of my portfolio, what do I need to gain just to get back to even?
You need a 33% gain, which is already pretty painful.
Already tough.
But if you suffer a 50% loss, which is, not uncommon in a sharp market downturn, you need a full 100% gain just to return to the starting line.
That's the real shock, isn't it? The loss is linear, but the recovery, it's geometric. The deeper the hole, the harder it is to climb out.
Precisely. When you lose 50%, you haven't lost half your time to recover. You've effectively multiplied the time needed to get back to zero by, a factor of 4 or 5, assuming average market returns.
And this isn't an opinion.
No, this is arithmetic. And arithmetic does not care about your optimism. It doesn't care about your feelings about the market.
And this brings us right to the first rule of compounding. We hear about the magic of compounding all the time, but the real power comes from protecting it.
Absolutely. The first rule is just never interrupt it unnecessarily. And yet, if you watch what most investors actually do, they interrupt it constantly.
They panic sell.
They panic sell when the market drops, they lock in those losses, or they chase the latest hot stock, pulling money out of stable investments.
Or they pull money out for unnecessary purchases, too. They see a dip, they get scared, they sell out of fear, and then the market recovers and they miss the whole upswing because they're waiting for some kind of certainty that just never comes.
That's it, exactly. Every single one of those interruptions costs you years. And when time is your most precious, most constrained resource, you just cannot afford these self-inflicted wounds.
It's so counterintuitive.
It is. The big money is not made in the buying and the selling. The big money is made in the waiting. And waiting patiently is the one thing most people, especially those who feel pressured by time, find almost impossible to do.
Okay, so if the game is fundamentally about avoiding these wounds, we need a better framework than just be patient. We need a mental tool. And this is where we get into the strategy of inversion.
Inversion. It's a concept from the old German mathematician Carl Gustav Jacobi. He was famous for solving what seemed like impossible problems by not attacking them head on. His constant refrain was, invert, always invert.
I think a lot of people initially hear that and think it's just pessimism or semantics, but it's actually an incredible tool for clarity.
It's absolute clarity. Instead of asking this highly vague, generalized question, how do I get rich, you flip it. You ask, how do I guarantee that I stay poor? By defining failure with that kind of precision, you know exactly which paths and behaviors to avoid. Success then becomes less about executing brilliant, high-risk moves and far more about just avoiding catastrophic mistakes.
So the people who sustain wealth aren't necessarily smarter or luckier. They've just engineered their lives to make fewer devastating errors.
That's the whole game.
So let's apply that. Let's identify the recipe for financial failure. We've got 5 ingredients that, when you combine them, pretty much guarantee the destruction of your finances.
And what's interesting is how common these are, even among high-income earners.
Ingredient number 1, borrowed money for investing. We're talking about using margin, taking out a home equity loan, any kind of debt to buy stocks or speculative assets.
The problem with debt for speculation is that it introduces fragility. The source material reminds us of that old adage about how smart men go broke in 3 ways, and debt is the real killer. It doesn't matter how high your IQ is.
Right, look at long-term capital management.
The perfect example. They had 2 Nobel Prize winners on staff. I mean, these were arguably the smartest people on Wall Street, but they used massive amounts of borrowed money to amplify their bets.
And they nearly collapsed the entire global financial system.
Correct. History shows us again and again that debt used for speculation all too often produces zeros, not riches. When you buy on margin, a slight chance of catastrophe always exists. And with a shorter time horizon, you just can't afford that catastrophe.
It's not just your initial investment. You could lose your house, your savings, everything.
And your ability to bounce back.
Okay, ingredient 2, spending more than you earn. This seems way too obvious, but it's the quiet default for so many people.
It's the foundation of almost all financial instability. And the insidious part is that once consumer debt gets its hooks in you, credit cards, auto loans, it is statistically very, very hard to escape.
And you have to contrast the compounding, right? Your investments might compound for you, but they're volatile. You could have a flat year, a down year.
That's the key comparison. Consumer debt compounds against you every single month without fail. And at very high interest rates, the difference between spending, say, 5% less than you earn versus 5% more over 20 years, that small gap creates either total freedom or a total set of financial chains.
A choice made every day at the cash register.
That's it.
Ingredient 3, I love this one, being unreliable. Now, this is beautiful counterintuitive insight. What on earth does reliability have to do with building wealth?
This is one of my favorite lessons because it connects human behavior directly to financial outcomes. Wealth opportunities. They flow through trust.
Okay.
Think about it. Who gets the biggest promotions? The trustworthy partner. Who gets the investment funding? The reliable entrepreneur. Who gets the valuable referrals? The person who's known for keeping their word.
You're talking about compound trust.
Precisely. A small act of reliability today, hitting a deadline, following through on a promise, it builds a tiny bit of trust capital. Over years, that trust compounds. Unreliable people, they burn through relationships, they lose this compound trust, and they can never get it back.
And they spend all their energy just rebuilding their reputation.
Instead of building new opportunities, when time is short, you can't afford to waste years rebuilding trust you should never have damaged in the first place.
That's lost income, lost opportunities. Okay, ingredient 4, refusing to learn anything new. We call this one the silent killer.
It's intellectual stagnation. You assume the knowledge that made you successful 10 or 20 years ago will just carry you through. But industries transform so rapidly.
You stop reading, you stop studying, you stop challenging your own assumptions.
And the reality is, the skills that made you successful might be worthless now. Technology changes the game, regulation shifts, and if you're just coasting on old knowledge, you fall behind slowly. And then all at once, suddenly you're redundant. Continuous learning isn't a luxury. It's an insurance policy against obsolescence.
And finally, ingredient 5, letting your emotions drive decisions. Panic, greed, anger, euphoria, all of it channeled directly into your money.
And a high IQ is zero protection here. Many people with immense intellectual capacity are just terrible investors because they have terrible temperaments.
Why is intelligence without emotional control worse than worthless?
Because smart people find sophisticated ways to destroy themselves. They don't just panic sell. They create these complex intellectual rationalizations for panic selling. Intelligence just amplifies emotional risk if it's not tethered to rigorous, disciplined rationality.
So we've defined the recipe for failure. Now that we know what to avoid, we have to look at the psychology that makes avoiding them so unbelievably hard. Let's pivot to the mindset.
Right. Understanding the math is the easy part. Controlling your own internal dialogue, that's the real battle.
The first trap is comfort, which always leads to stagnation. You've worked hard, you've built something. Your brain, guided by loss aversion, is just screaming, don't risk it.
Loss aversion is the key. Losses feel about twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. So the comfortable brain is constantly steering you toward what feels like absolute safety. You become unwilling to take calculated risks because you want to protect what you have above all else.
And that protection starts to look like a cage. You stay in a safe, going-nowhere job. You keep way too much money in low-yield savings because you can't stomach seeing the number on a statement drop, even for a day.
Comfort becomes a self-imposed financial prison.
The second trap is fear. Specifically, the paralyzing fear that it's too late. You look at the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and it just seems insurmountable.
And that feeling of hopelessness causes you to freeze.
It's denial dressed up as realism, isn't it? The brain says, I can't possibly catch up, so why bother trying?
Exactly. And the fear that it's too late becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stop making those positive changes. You stop saving aggressively. You stop looking for new income because you've decided it's hopeless. And because you stop trying, it becomes hopeless.
You forfeit the game.
Before the final whistle.
And the third trap, self-pity, victimhood. This is the most dangerous because it often feels completely justified. Maybe you went through a terrible divorce, a job loss, a health crisis. Life is unfair.
Life will deliver terrible, unfair blows. That's a guarantee. But in the context of financial strategy, the sources are crystal clear. Self-pity leads to the end of responsibility. It leads to paranoia. You stop looking for solutions and you start blaming everything and everyone else.
The duty here isn't to wallow. The duty is to utilize that terrible blow in a constructive way. You take the setback, you learn, and you move forward with what you have left.
The people who build lasting wealth are not the ones who had the fewest setbacks. They're the ones who refuse to let those setbacks define the rest of their decisions.
This brings us to the skills that separate those who move forward from those who stagnate. Preparation, discipline, patience, and decisiveness. Let's look at competence and rationality as actionable tools.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, the long-term advantage comes from trying to be consistently not stupid, rather than trying to be dazzlingly intelligent.
Right. We said high IQ can be a disadvantage because of overconfidence.
Exactly. The person who knows they're just average, paradoxically, often does better financially because they respect the limits of their own knowledge.
And that is the perfect segue into the circle of competence, the C of C.
This is the defined area where you truly understand the risks and rewards. And it's not just things you've read about, it's things you have real domain expertise in.
The trap is thinking your circle is bigger than it is. You run a successful gentle practice, so you assume you understand complex derivatives or commercial real estate in the city you've never even visited.
Oh, and that kind of error can wipe you out. Sticking ruthlessly to the center of your circle of competence is critical for avoiding stupid errors. If you don't understand it, you don't invest in it, period.
But the circle of competence isn't fixed, right? You can expand it.
You can, but you have to do it responsibly. Through relentless, continuous learning. The wise people I've known are the ones who read all the time. They go to bed every night a little bit wiser than when they got up. That compounded wisdom lets you expand the circle safely over time.
Beyond competence, we need rationality. Making decisions based on evidence and being willing to change your mind when the facts change.
There's a great test for this, the rational test. You are not entitled to an opinion unless you can state the arguments against your position better than the people who actually support it.
Wow, that's a high bar.
It is. But if you can't articulate the opposing viewpoint, you don't truly understand your own.
How do you practice that kind of self-reflection without just falling into denial about your mistakes?
A valuable practice is creating and reviewing a temple of shame. It's a written record of every single terrible financial decision you've ever made. You study your failure patterns, overconfidence, emotionality, denial, so you can fight them. You have to force yourself to confront unpleasant realities.
That brings us to maybe the most practical milestone for anyone starting later. The brutal, necessary journey to the first $100,000.
This number is absolutely vital. It's where the geometric power of compounding really starts to kick in.
Let's be brutally specific about the difference this makes in actual numbers.
Okay, let's assume a 10% annual return for simplicity. If you have a $10,000 portfolio, 10% gets you $1,000. It's nice, but it's not life-changing.
Right.
But when you hit $100,000, 10% gets you $10,000, and that $10,000 is then reinvested.
Yeah.
That is a tenfold difference in absolute growth power.
You've just increased the amount your money is working for you by a factor of 10. The first 100K is where you do all the heavy lifting, saving, cutting expenses.
Correct. After that milestone, the growth on your money starts doing more of the work for you. That's why starting later requires aggression, but aggression with savings and income growth, not with speculative risk. The goal is to reach that critical threshold as fast as you can.
You build readiness during the quiet period so that when an opportunity comes, you can act. The ultimate framework here is what the sources call the soldier-on system.
It's a simple concept, really. 3 parts. First, you soldier through hardship. Financial life is rarely a smooth ride. Second, you have to recognize the few rare opportunities when they arise. And third, you have to act decisively when they come.
And most people fail at all three. They crumble under hardship, they're too distracted to see a real opportunity, and when one appears, they just nibble instead of acting with real conviction.
It connects everything we've talked about, rationality, competence, emotional control, into one action-oriented system.
So we can conclude with the ultimate paradox of time. You have less of it than you used to, but you often have more time than you think to fundamentally change your trajectory.
The difference between giving up and starting today is just staggering. Take a simple calculation. Saving $2,000 a month for 15 years at a modest 7% return. That yields around $630,000,
That is a life-altering amount of capital.
built purely through discipline and time.
The person who succumbs to fear and says, it's too late, and does nothing ends up with zero. The person who says, it's late but I'll start anyway, ends up with hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That one difference, that single moment of discipline, might be the difference between dignity and desperation in your final decades.
The path to building sustainable wealth later in life isn't magic. It's not a secret formula from a hot stock tip. It's arithmetic, it's discipline, and it's the consistent, relentless pursuit of becoming less stupid. So go to bed tonight having studied your temple of shame, a little wiser than you were this morning. Do the same tomorrow, step by step, you get ahead.